The screaming started the moment the plane climbed past 30,000 feet. Emma's wails sliced through the cabin like glass breaking. Passengers turned eyes wide, lips pressed in judgment, a silent chorus of impatience and disdain. John Miller gripped the armrest until his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded. His chest ached with exhaustion he didn't have time to feel. He whispered into his daughter's trembling body, "Baby, Daddy's got you. I'm right here." But the noise only grew louder, raw, and urgent. Every seat around him felt like a spotlight, every whisper like a verdict. A man in a pressed grey suit leaned forward, muttering under his breath, "Control your kid." The words weren't loud, but they landed like stones. The flight attendant's heels clicked with a practiced rhythm as she approached her smile tight-measured warning rather than friendly. John's throat was dry. He had been alone for almost a year. Alone with Emma. Every step of the day, meticulously planned, feeding schedule diaper bag packed with military precision, white noise, playlist-loaded articles, bookmarked advice taken from every single dad forum he could find. And yet nothing worked. Somewhere near the center of the cabin, a woman stirred. She was tall, late 30s, sharp eyes rimmed with exhaustion, a small daughter sleeping beside her. Her gaze flicked to John, assessing, calculating, not with curiosity, but with quiet authority. She didn't move immediately. She waited, and in that pause the air thickened. Cameras might have caught the moment in another life, but here time slowed in real life, the kind of slow that forces every passenger to feel the tension. John rocked Emma again. Bottle, pacifier, humming, gentle bouncing. Nothing. The baby's cries clawed at his nerves. His hands shook. He knew the verdict in every gaze: incompetent, inadequate. A father wasn't enough. Mothers whispered this truth without saying a word, but the silence of judgment was deafening. He thought of the night Madison had died, how he had held Emma, how her tiny body had breathed for 37 precious seconds in his arms before everything collapsed. He swallowed, tasting bile and grief, feeling the cabin shrink around him. The woman across the aisle rose, the movement quiet but deliberate. Her dark ponytail swayed as she stepped forward. She didn't ask permission. She didn't hesitate. Her daughter stirred just briefly, then settled back, oblivious to the chaos unfolding around them. "Let me," she said, her voice low but commanding. Not a question, not an invitation. John froze, a reflexive no caught in his throat. But the authority in her tone was absolute, carved from experience, fatigue, and an unspoken understanding of children. The aisle felt impossibly narrow. Passengers shifted, some leaning, some drawing back. The woman took Emma, gently lifting the baby, as if she belonged there, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. The crying stopped, not gradually, not in fits, but immediately, as though someone had switched the world off and on again. Emma nestled into the crook of her arms, tiny fingers curling around a strand of Sarah's hair, seeking comfort in something she had been missing. John sat stunned, silent. The flight attendant paused mid-step, her scripted concern evaporating, replaced by genuine disbelief. Other passengers leaned back into their seats, a few mouths agape, all of them holding the tension like fragile glass. John's mind raced, trying to comprehend what had just happened. He had tried for hours and failed. This stranger had succeeded in moments. His chest tightened, not with shame this time, but with awe and confusion. Sarah didn't look at him directly at first. Her eyes flicked out of the window at the dark expanse above Nebraska. Her voice softened just enough to reach his ears. She just needed to be held by someone who wasn't afraid. John's throat constricted. He wanted to speak, to thank her, to understand how she had done it, but the words lodged somewhere between disbelief and gratitude. "Your baby is extraordinary," Sarah continued, rocking Emma gently. "But even extraordinary babies need someone who trusts them, who isn't terrified to try." John's mind drifted to the countless nights he had whispered apologies into Emma's ears. "I'm sorry, baby. Daddy's trying." He realized now that she hadn't needed apologies. She had needed courage. Someone willing to be still patient, fearless. Sarah's daughter Lily stirred and looked at Emma with cautious curiosity. The 4-year-old's gaze was serious, measured, like she understood the weight of what was happening without being told. Sarah glanced down at her own child, then back at John, and for the first time in months, John felt a small crack in the wall he had built around himself. They were two people alone, trying, failing, learning, and suddenly, for a brief instant, something clicked. The flight continued, but the world felt lighter. John watched Sarah settle Emma into her lap for the remainder of the flight. He realized how much trust this had required, how much empathy, and how rare that kind of instinctive kindness was. He caught glimpses of other passengers, now watching some softening in their judgment. Others too tired to care, all witnessing a subtle human miracle. By the time the plane began its descent, Emma was asleep. Sarah returned her daughter to John with care, a moment of quiet handover, fingers brushing, eyes meeting. "Thank you," he said finally, voice thick with emotion, barely audible above the hum of engines and the occasional intercom chime. "No need," she replied softly. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't require a reason. John carried Emma off the plane and into the early dawn of Seattle. The airport was emptying lights flickering across the tarmac. Sarah waved Lily, clinging to her hand, and for a moment John imagined what life would be like if more people stepped forward in small, fearless ways. Later he would drive toward the cafe Sarah had mentioned, a modest neighborhood spot on Maple Street. The streets were quiet, leaves drifting across the asphalt in the faint morning light. He parked across the street, watching families, couples, and children moving through the warmth of small tables and muted chatter. He could see Sarah behind the counter, hair braided loosely, apron dusted with flour, laughing with a customer over coffee. He imagined Emma meeting Lily again, their tiny hands reaching, exploring, sharing toys and crayons. The thought alone brought a tight smile to his face, and he knew with a deep, steady certainty that no matter how heavy the world seemed, no matter how sharp the judgment or how long the night's cries lasted, there was always a chance for connection. A moment where fear could be replaced with trust, where struggle could meet understanding, and where even the smallest act of courage could rewrite a day, a heart, a life. John traced the cafe's green awning through the windshield. Somewhere beyond the glass, the two little girls waited, and as the first hints of sunlight broke across the horizon, he whispered to himself, "Let's see what happens next." The cafe smelled of fresh coffee, toasted bread, and something faintly floral, a scent that instantly grounded John as he pushed open the glass door. Morning light spilled across mismatched tables, catching dust motes in the air like tiny stars suspended in time. He carried Emma in the car seat. Her tiny fingers curled loosely around the edge of the fabric, still half asleep from the plane ride. His heart thudded with the familiar rhythm of anticipation and uncertainty. Sarah stood behind the counter, wiping a ceramic mug with a cloth dusted with flour. Her posture was casual but precise, a quiet confidence that radiated even across the narrow space. Lily sat at a small table near the window, crayons scattered across the surface, her forehead creased in concentration as she sketched a butterfly with careful strokes. She didn't notice John at first. John cleared his throat. Lily's head lifted slowly. Her eyes, still drowsy, widened when she saw him. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, a mixture of recognition and excitement that made John's chest tighten. He approached cautiously, setting Emma's car seat on the nearest chair with gentle care. Lily scrambled to her feet, small legs wobbling but determined. Sarah looked up, recognition flickering across her tired eyes. A small smile curved her lips. "Morning, John," she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that contrasted with the crispness of her movements. She gestured toward Lily. "She's been waiting for you." John nodded, unsure if he should kneel, sit, or simply watch. Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Can we play?" she asked. Her voice held a gravity that belied her age, the kind of seriousness only a 4-year-old could muster when she decided something mattered. John crouched, lowering himself to her height. "Of course, pumpkin," he said, his tone steady, despite the storm of emotions inside him. Emma stirred, blinking up at Sarah and John, her eyes wool and alert now. She recognized the energy, the calm that had emanated from Sarah on the plane, and seemed to relax in John's presence. Her tiny hands reached toward Lily as if seeking connection, curiosity overriding fatigue. Lily hesitated, glancing at Sarah for approval, then extended her own small fingers. Emma grasped them tentatively, and a fragile bridge formed between the two children. John watched the interaction, a mixture of awe and cautious optimism tightening in his chest. The girls began to play quietly, exchanging colors, crayons, and tentative smiles. He realized how much weight this moment carried, not just for the children, but for him as a father. He had been alone for so long, struggling to interpret cries to soothe fears he barely understood. Now he saw a glimpse of what collaboration of trust between adults and children could achieve. Sarah stepped closer, setting down a tray of pastries. "I made extra for you," she said, a slight tremor in her voice, betraying the tension she had carried. She met John's eyes for a moment, and in that glance a silent understanding passed. Both had known exhaustion, both had known isolation, both had known judgment without justification. The cafe door swung open again. A man in his mid-40s entered, sharp eyes scanning the room with the precision of someone who measured opportunity in microseconds. He wore a tailored navy suit, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. John's gaze flicked toward him automatically, sensing the subtle shift in energy. Sarah stiffened slightly, but did not break eye contact with the man. Lily paused mid-stroke, sensing the tension, her small hand gripping a crayon. The man approached the counter, his movements deliberate, slow-controlled. "Morning," he said, his voice smooth, measured. "I'm looking for someone named Sarah Thompson." Sarah's hand froze on the cloth. She swallowed, lips pressed together. "I'm Sarah," she replied, steady but cautious. The man's eyes scanned her, noting the flour dust on her apron, the faint lines around her eyes, the subtle exhaustion. He nodded once sharply and produced a small folder from his briefcase. "I've been authorized to observe," he said, his tone clipped. "I need to ensure procedures are followed correctly." John's stomach tightened. Observation authority. He wasn't sure whether to feel protective, wary, or both. Emma stirred in her seat, her gaze flicking to the man, alert to the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Sarah gestured for him to step aside, leading him to a small corner near the back. John watched, sensing that the man's presence would change the dynamics. Lily's focus wavered, crayons forgotten. Sarah whispered to him, "Don't worry. He's just here to make sure everything's fine." Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed tension. The man observed silently, every movement, every gesture. John noticed the subtle notes he took, the way he calculated timing, spacing, and interaction. It wasn't judgment. It was scrutiny. And scrutiny carried weight, the kind that could topple or validate. Lily broke the silence. "Daddy, look," she said, holding up a crayon-drawn butterfly wings, asymmetrical but vibrant. John leaned closer, offering a nod of encouragement. The man's eyes flicked to the drawing, a faint tightening at the corner of his jaw, betraying an acknowledgement, almost imperceptible, of authenticity. Then came the subtle twist. Emma reached toward the man's briefcase, curiosity overriding caution. John instinctively moved forward, but Sarah's hand rested lightly on his arm. "Let her explore," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. John hesitated, uncertainty gnawing at him. The man's eyes softened, a flicker of surprise in the sharp lines of his face. He knelt slightly, making himself smaller, non-threatening. Emma's tiny fingers touched the leather, the polished corners, and she recoiled slightly, testing boundaries. The man smiled faintly, careful, respectful, a subtle shift in energy that communicated trust. John exhaled, realizing that the tension in the room had shifted, not dissolved but redirected, shaped by awareness and subtle authority. The cafe's door chimed again. A woman entered, late 50s silver hair, in a tight bun, her eyes scanning the room with practiced calm. She carried herself with an air of command, yet there was warmth in the way she observed the children. Sarah straightened subtly, tensing. The new arrival approached, nodding politely to Sarah, then to John. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Laura Benson, family liaison. I'm here to ensure the transition goes smoothly." John blinked, mind racing. Transition liaison. Questions stacked, but before he could speak, Laura gestured toward Lily and Emma. "May I?" Her voice was gentle, commanding. The girls hesitated, then gravitated toward her, sensing the calm authority she radiated. John realized that the morning had become more than a casual reunion. It was a stage for observation, trust-building, and testing bonds under scrutiny he hadn't anticipated. Sarah caught his eye. "They're watching us," she whispered. "All of us. Every gesture counts." John's pulse quickened. The playful, innocent world he had envisioned with the girls was now layered with tension, responsibility, and unseen expectations. Every smile, every movement, every breath held weight. Then the man from the corner spoke low, deliberate. "John, what you do here matters beyond this room. Every interaction shapes trust, shapes perception." His eyes scanned the cafe, lingering on Sarah, Lily, Emma. And sometimes the smallest acts carry consequences far beyond what we anticipate. John nodded slowly, absorbing the gravity. He glanced at Sarah, whose expression softened as she guided Lily's tiny hand back to crayons. Emma reached up toward his chest, cooing softly, grounding him. He realized that the day's tension, the scrutiny, the subtle tests were all part of a larger picture: responsibility, trust, human connection, and the unspoken power of guidance. Outside, the city began to stir. Light spilled through the cafe windows, casting long, thin shadows across the floor. The children laughed quietly now, crayons moving wings and shapes forming on paper. But John understood that beneath the playful surface there was a lesson in patience, courage, and awareness. Every passenger, every observer, every subtle act of attention or care mattered. The plane had brought him here exhausted and tested. The cafe had become a proving ground, not just for his skills as a father, but for his capacity to navigate the unexpected, to extend trust, and to recognize the unspoken currents of human behavior. And somewhere in the soft hum of conversation, the scratch of crayons, the gentle stir of air from the opening door, John felt the first pulse of understanding that courage wasn't always loud, that influence wasn't always visible, and that empathy, the kind Sarah had shown on the plane, could rewrite not just a moment, but a lifetime. The day had begun with screams, judgment, and fear. It was unfolding into discovery, connection, and the quiet power of trust. John leaned back slightly, watching the two girls, feeling the weight of the world soften just a fraction in the warmth of morning sunlight. He whispered to Emma, barely audible, "We'll get through this, baby. Together." The city outside continued to awaken, oblivious to the lessons unfolding within. But John knew that every moment mattered, every choice mattered, and the ripples of this morning would carry far beyond Maple Street. The air in the cafe held its quiet charge, the calm before the next test, the next twist, the next opportunity to rise to what mattered most. And John, watching, breathing, and learning, understood that this was only the beginning. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed high enough to cast warm light across Maple Street, illuminating the small cafe in a golden glow. John Miller stood outside car engine, idling, holding Emma close in her carrier. Her eyes were wide alert now, reflecting the filtered sunlight, as if measuring the space she had entered. Inside, the smell of coffee, warm pastries, and the faint tang of flour reminded him of ordinary life. But ordinary had never felt so charged with possibility. Sarah Thompson was behind the counter, wiping down a row of freshly used tables, her movements precise, almost ritualistic. Lily was still at the corner table, crayons in hand, a sheet of paper covered with vibrant lines and swirls. Her concentration was absolute, yet her eyes occasionally flicked up to the door, as if sensing something extraordinary approaching. John stepped inside, lowering Emma carefully into a seat, her small hands clinging to the edge of the carrier. Lily looked up instantly, brightening, and pushed herself to her knees. "Daddy," she called, voice urgent, full of unspent excitement. Emma cooed softly, responding in her own baby rhythm, a tiny voice that resonated with cautious curiosity. Sarah watched silently, a shadow of fatigue in her eyes, but her posture remained upright, commanding the space with a quiet authority. She moved closer, placing a plate of warm croissants near the girls, her fingers brushing lightly against the polished surface. "Good morning, John," she said softly. Her voice held a measured warmth, the kind that invited trust but carried weight for those who paid attention. John exhaled, feeling the weight of the last 12 hours of the flight of judgment of relief, and then the strange undercurrent. He hadn't anticipated the presence of another figure watching from the corner. A man in his 40s, sharply dressed in a navy blazer, stood near the entrance arms, crossed posture rigid. His eyes scanned the cafe like a hawk, calculating each movement, each subtle exchange between adults and children. Sarah's gaze flicked toward him. Her hand paused mid-motion, wiping a table. There was a tension almost imperceptible, but it set John's senses on high alert. The man's lips pressed into a thin line, eyes narrowing, evaluating not just them, but the entire environment. The flow of interaction, the trust dynamics between the children and adults. John stepped closer to the counter. "Morning," he said, his voice calm but steady. "I'm thinking of letting the girls play for a bit. Is that okay, Sarah?" Met his eyes, the faintest hesitation passing across her face before she nodded. "Of course. Just keep an eye on Emma," she said softly. Lily's attention shifted back to the crayons, but Emma's gaze followed the man near the door, white and cautious. The man moved, then slow, deliberate, approaching the counter. His voice was low, controlled, each word measured. "Sarah Thompson." He paused, scanning the cafe. "I'm Mark Reynolds, Child Development Consultant. I've been assigned to observe your interaction protocols for the day." John's chest tightened. "Observation assessment." He tightened his hold on Emma, whose tiny fingers clenched instinctively. Sarah's movements didn't falter, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of tension. "Observation," she repeated quietly. "Right here, or—" She gestured toward a small table in the corner. Mark nodded, settling into the seat, eyes fixed on every movement, every glance, every subtle exchange. His presence was a charged pressure, making the air heavier, the colors in the room sharper, the slightest sound amplified. Lily glanced up, pencil trembling in her fingers. "Daddy, who's that?" she whispered. John's jaw tightened. "Someone making sure we're doing everything safely," he replied, voice low but firm. He wasn't lying, not entirely. But the layers of scrutiny, unspoken rules, and the weight of authority pressed against him, invisible, yet undeniable. Emma squirmed slightly, sensing the tension. John adjusted her in the seat, offering a soft hum, a steadying vibration that communicated calm. Lily, encouraged by the subtle cue, resumed her drawing, each stroke deliberate, precise, almost mirroring the tension in the adults. Minutes passed, measured dense, each tick of the wall clock pressing against their awareness. Then Mark leaned forward, slightly, voice quiet but cutting. "Children respond to consistency, predictability, and emotional resonance. Your actions need to reflect authority without intimidation, empathy without hesitation." His eyes locked on John. "Do you understand the consequences of a lapse in attention?" John swallowed. The words weren't a threat. They were a scalpel precise, dissecting his every instinct, testing him. He nodded once, tight, careful. "Yes, I do," he said, tone flat, steady. Though internally, his mind raced through every interaction of the last year, every feed, every cry, every sleepless night. Sarah interjected, soft but firm. "Mark, the children are safe. They're learning trust boundaries and social interaction. That's the point." Mark's eyes flicked toward her briefly, then back to John. "I will be the judge of that. Observations are cumulative. Small errors ripple into behavioral patterns. Understand." John's throat constricted. He did. Every decision, every hesitation could be catalogued, assessed. Every micro-expression, every glance, a record of competence or failure. The cafe door chimed again. A woman entered, mid-60s, silver hair, pinned neatly, eyes sharp with the clarity of experience. She carried a tote, practical understated. Her presence immediately shifted the room, a calm authority that seemed to slow the pulse of time. Sarah straightened, subtle tension easing slightly. Mark's posture shifted, acknowledging her presence without words. "Morning, Sarah," she said, eyes flicking toward John and Emma. "I'm Helen Carver, Early Childhood Program Supervisor. I'm here to assess today's interactions." She scanned the room, noting the layout, the children's placement, the flow of adult attention. John felt a prickle of anticipation, a faint thrill. This morning had escalated far beyond his expectations, and yet each step was a test, a measure of his endurance and instinct. Helen moved closer to the table with the girls kneeling to their level, offering a soft smile. Her hands open, inviting but measured. Lily glanced at her, unsure, then returned to her drawing. Emma, sensing the warmth, shifted slightly, curling her tiny fingers around John's thumb. John exhaled slowly. The weight of scrutiny pressed, but he could feel the subtle shift, safety, trust, empathy, in action, observed but respected. Sarah whispered to him, "Keep your focus. Every move, every glance counts." They're measuring not just technique, but presence, emotional stability, resilience under observation. John nodded, eyes scanning the room, absorbing the interplay of authority, warmth, and scrutiny. His role was no longer just a father. He was a participant in a live, measured study of human behavior, navigating observation without losing authenticity. The morning stretched tension, coiling release withheld. Then Lily dropped a crayon, and Emma reached out instinctively, their hands brushing. Helen's eyes softened briefly, a micro-expression almost invisible to the casual observer. Mark's pen scratched quietly against his pad. Sarah's shoulders relaxed fractionally. John realized in that instant that subtle human connections, tiny acts of trust, empathy, and attentiveness could shift the balance of evaluation entirely. Then came the unthinkable. A sudden crash from the corner table. Lily had knocked over a cup, the ceramic shattering against the floor. Emma cried out, startled. John's heart leapt. Mark leaned forward, eyebrows raised. Helen's hands moved swiftly, guiding both children, steadying, reassuring. Sarah's voice cut through the tension, sharp but calm. "It's okay. Accidents happen. Everyone breathe." John froze, waiting for censure, for a note, a mark, a record of failure. Instead, Helen and Mark exchanged glances. The recognition in their eyes was subtle, almost imperceptible. They had just witnessed instinct presence, empathy in action, crisis-managed trust, preserved authority, tempered with care. The cafe settled into a quiet hum again. The air thick with observation, now felt charged with understanding. John watched his daughter and Lily return to their play, each movement deliberate, cautious, yet liberated by the calm around them. Sarah returned behind the counter, wiping the surface, a faint smile appearing. John allowed himself a moment to breathe, to absorb the fragile victory of morning, the balance between scrutiny, responsibility, and human connection. Outside, sunlight glinted off the windows. Shadows stretched across the street. Maple Street had begun its day, oblivious to the intricate choreography inside the small cafe. But inside, John felt the weight of what had just occurred, trust built under observation, resilience demonstrated quietly, and the subtle, powerful influence of empathy, courage, and patience, all under the eyes of those who could measure it. And John understood fully that this morning every glance, every whisper, every measured action would echo far beyond the cafe walls. The children were safe. He had survived observation. Trust had been earned. And yet the morning was only the first test. A storm of scrutiny still loomed, a challenge yet to unfold, waiting to test him. Sarah and the fragile bonds forming between two children, one father and the network of unseen eyes measuring every move. The day had begun with caution, observation, and tension, and it would continue with revelation, challenge, and discovery. John's grip on Emma tightened slightly, not with fear, but with focus, anticipation, and the quiet determination that this day would teach him more than any flight, any judgment, or any whispered critique could convey. By late morning, the cafe was alive with the subtle rhythm of routine steam rising from espresso machines, low murmurs of conversation, and the faint click of Lily's crayons against paper. John Miller sat at a small corner table, Emma snug against his chest, eyes wide and alert, taking in the patterns of light and shadow dancing across the floor. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the intensity of anticipation. Every sound, every movement seemed magnified, each interaction pregnant with unseen stakes. Sarah moved behind the counter with fluid precision, attending to customers with an efficiency that belied the exhaustion in her eyes. There was a sharpness to her posture, a watchfulness that suggested she had anticipated everything the morning might bring. Her daughter Lily was absorbed in drawing, but every so often her gaze flicked to John and Emma, then back to the page, a quiet vigilance underscoring her play. The cafe door opened again, swinging inward on creaking hinges, and a man stepped inside. Mid-40s tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, subtle silver cufflinks catching the sunlight. His eyes swept the room like a predator scanning territory, calculating, evaluating, measuring every dynamic. John's pulse tightened. He could feel the tension before the man even spoke. "Sarah Thompson," the man said, his voice low, controlled, precise. "Mark Reynolds, child development consultant. I've been authorized to observe interactions this morning. I will be taking detailed notes." His gaze flicked to John, then back to the children, weighing their every movement. John's fingers tightened around the edge of Emma's carrier, a reflexive shield. Sarah straightened shoulders, squared eyes meeting his without a flicker of fear. "Very well," she said, her tone calm, precise. She guided him to a seat near the back, just enough to keep him close to the action, without disrupting the flow. Lily's attention wavered, a faint frown forming as she sensed the shift in energy, her small hands pausing mid-stroke. The first few minutes passed in measured observation. John adjusted Emma in her seat, her tiny fingers curling around his thumb, grounding him. He watched Sarah move, balancing multiple orders, interacting with customers, guiding Lily, and subtly checking in on him. Each glance, each tilt of her head, each soft word to the girls was deliberate, calibrated to maintain calm and safety. Then Mark spoke again, voice quiet but sharp, slicing through the background noise. "Attention to micro-reactions is critical. Children read more than they verbalize. Missteps in tone, in timing, in subtle cues can cascade. Do you understand the weight of what is being observed?" John swallowed, throat tight. He nodded once. "Yes, I understand." As if on cue, a sudden commotion arose from the back of the cafe. A chair tipped over with a crash, startling both Emma and Lily. John's heart jumped. He lifted his hands instinctively, ready to intervene. Sarah's eyes flicked to the source, then back to John, and in one fluid motion, she crossed the room. She knelt at Lily's level, steadying the girl, smoothing her hair, whispering a soft admonishment with calm authority. Mark scribbled furiously, noting every subtle gesture, every blink, every breath. John exhaled slowly, tension threading through him. The incident could have unraveled the fragile equilibrium they had established. Instead, it showcased the trust they had built, the delicate choreography of authority and empathy executed flawlessly under pressure. The door chimed again, and this time a woman entered, older, early 60s hair, silvered with age, eyes sharp and assessing every movement purposeful. She carried herself with the kind of presence that commanded attention without a word. John felt the room shift subtly, a change in energy that tightened the atmosphere and heightened awareness. "Sarah Thompson," she asked, voice measured, controlled. "Helen Carver, family liaison and behavioral assessor. I am here to observe the dynamics and ensure compliance with developmental standards for early childhood interactions." Her eyes swept the room, taking in seating arrangements, the children's postures, the adult attentiveness. John's pulse quickened, every instinct on alert. Sarah acknowledged her with a slight nod, voice calm. "Of course. Please observe, but the children are comfortable." She glanced at John, a silent communication passing between them. "Stay steady. Maintain the rhythm. Trust the process." Lily's attention flicked toward Helen. Hesitation in her small body. But Emma's curiosity overrode her caution, and she reached upward toward John, seeking reassurance. Mark leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Every response, every reaction will be recorded. Emotional stability under observation is critical. A lapse, however minor, could distort developmental assessments." John's fingers tightened instinctively around Emma's carrier. He understood that what seemed ordinary small glances, soothing hums, careful hand placement, was under scrutiny, evaluated for precision, intent, and consequence. A soft giggle from Lily broke the tension, her small hands moving the crayons with renewed focus. Emma cooed in response, a quiet, rhythmic sound that anchored John's nerves. Sarah moved fluidly, keeping the girls engaged, her movements precise, almost imperceptible in their control. John noticed the subtle shifts, how Sarah's eyes communicated reassurance, how her posture regulated the energy in the room. Then the unexpected happened. Emma reached out toward the assessment folder Mark had left on a nearby chair, curiosity pulling her tiny fingers. John lunged instinctively, but Sarah placed her hand lightly on his arm. "Let her explore," she whispered, calm and measured. John froze, uncertainty battling instinct. Mark's eyes flicked downward, a hint of surprise crossing his rigid features. Emma's tiny fingers brushed the folder, then retreated, tentative, exploring boundaries. Mark leaned closer, pen hovering, capturing every micro-expression, every hesitation. Sarah maintained her calm, subtly guiding, subtly reinforcing trust without overt interference. John exhaled, realizing that the tension had shifted, not dissolved, but redirected into something productive, a silent lesson in authority, empathy, and trust. Minutes stretched. The girls' interaction stabilized, crayons moving across paper, small hands interlacing, creating a pattern of play and connection. Helen moved closer, kneeling near Lily and Emma, offering a gentle presence without dominance. The children reacted instinctively, leaning into her calm energy. John watched a mixture of relief, awe, and subtle anxiety threading through him. Then, without warning, a minor accident. A cup tipped over, spilling juice across the corner table. Emma startled, a soft cry escaping. Lily froze, eyes wide. John tensed. Sarah acted immediately, her movement swift but gentle, securing the girls, wiping the mess, soothing the startled children. Mark scribbled even faster, pen scratching across the pad, noting every reaction, every instinctive decision. The room's energy shifted again, now balanced between tension and trust. John felt a profound sense of awareness settle over him. Every gesture, every glance, every breath held significance, not just in observation, but in the delicate architecture of human connection. Sarah returned to the counter, glancing at John briefly, a faint, approving nod, acknowledging the subtle victories of the morning. Outside sunlight hit the pavement in sharp lines, shadows stretching across Maple Street. The cafe continued its rhythm, but inside John understood the magnitude of the morning observation, judgment, empathy, authority, all interwoven, delicate and transformative. The children played Emma, cooed Lily, focused, and yet every subtlety had been witnessed, every action catalogued, every choice weighted with consequence. John adjusted Emma, resting her against his chest, and felt the quiet surge of understanding, patience, courage, and trust. These were the tools that mattered most. The morning had tested him, challenged him, exposed the raw edges of his endurance, and yet the calm, careful management of each interaction, the guidance Sarah provided, and the subtle supervision of Mark and Helen had created a fragile triumph safety connection and resilience under scrutiny. The day was far from over. More tests would come, more scrutiny, more moments to prove understanding, presence, and calm. But John, holding Emma, observing the children, and sensing the subtle currents of authority and empathy around him, felt a quiet, profound resolve. He would meet every challenge with attention, patience, and courage, because in this room, Every act, every word, every glance carried weight, far beyond the walls of the cafe, echoing into the children's sense of security, trust, and the unspoken lessons that would shape them. John exhaled slowly, the tension softening just enough to allow hope to thread through. The girls continued to play crayons, scratching across paper colors, blooming small laughter, escaping like a secret. And John Hart, steadying, understood fully the morning had been a crucible, a test of authority, empathy, and patience. He had passed, but the lessons would resonate far longer than he could yet measure. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, the subtle choreography of trust, attention, and human connection had unfolded quietly but irrevocably, a testament to resilience, presence, and the power of careful, deliberate empathy. John adjusted. Emma whispered softly, "We're learning, baby." Together, and for the first time that morning, he felt that every challenge, every judgment, every tiny observation was part of something larger, something shaping lives, trust, and a fragile, beautiful sense of possibility. By early afternoon, the cafe had grown busier, sunlight streaming in through the large windows, scattering golden rectangles across the wooden floor. John Miller kept a careful eye on Emma as she sat in the carrier, eyes alert, fingers twitching at the fabric. Lily was still at the corner table, crayons strewn about, but now she was actively narrating to Emma, describing every color and shape with a seriousness that made John smile, despite the tension he still carried. Sarah moved behind the counter, handling orders, refilling cups, wiping tables, all with a rhythm that suggested both precision and exhaustion. Her eyes occasionally flicked toward John, a brief nod or small smile, acknowledging the subtle victories they had achieved so far. But there was an undercurrent of anticipation, an unspoken sense that the morning's observation was only the beginning. John had just begun to relax when the bell over the door chimed again. He felt a flicker of instinctive caution. A man entered mid-30s, wearing a tailored suit in muted navy eyes, sharp movements deliberate. He paused at the threshold, surveying the room with the intensity of someone evaluating every detail, every possible interaction. John tensed Emma, stiffening slightly against his chest. "Sarah Thompson," the man said, his voice even precise controlled. "I'm Daniel Reed, early childhood consultant. I've been asked to observe interactions today and report on developmental and behavioral dynamics. I'll be taking notes." His gaze swept the room, settling briefly on the children, then back to John, measuring reactions. Sarah straightened shoulders firm. "Of course," she said, gesturing toward a small table in the back. "You're welcome to observe, but please do not interfere with the children." Daniel inclined his head, eyes sharp as he sat, pen poised. John could feel the tension coil again, the subtle pressure of observation settling over the cafe like a heavy fog. Emma stirred, cooing softly. John adjusted her, letting her rest against his chest, rocking slightly in rhythm with her breathing. Lily watched the new arrival with cautious curiosity, a frown forming briefly before she returned to drawing. John's pulse raced, each subtle movement carrying weight under the watchful eyes in the room. Minutes passed in careful observation. John and Sarah continued their coordinated rhythm, small interactions layered with subtle cues, micro-expressions, careful glances. Markings were being noted, every micro-gesture catalogued, every pause and response scrutinized. The children were learning, reacting, and building trust, all under the invisible yet palpable authority of the observers. Then, without warning, a subtle challenge arose. A woman entered the cafe, late 40s, grey streaks in her hair, carrying a clipboard and moving with an air of command. Her eyes swept the room with practiced precision, and John felt a subtle tension tighten in his chest. She approached Sarah quietly. "I'm Lauren Price, Program Evaluator," she said, her voice low, resonant with authority. "I'll be assessing both the environment and adult-child interactions." Sarah nodded briefly, a flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes. "Understood," she replied softly, yet her posture remained rigid with awareness. Lily glanced up, sensing the shift, while Emma's fingers tightened slightly around John's thumb. John exhaled slowly, bracing for another layer of observation. As Lauren took a seat at a small table near the back, she began to watch the children with a keen eye, occasionally scribbling notes. Her presence was subtle but influential, shifting the rhythm of the room. John felt the pressure keenly. Every word he spoke, every glance he shared with Sarah, even the smallest gesture toward Emma, was being evaluated. The weight of accountability pressed against him, heavy, but oddly clarifying. Then came the subtle disruption, a crash from the corner table. Lily's cup had tipped over, spilling water across her coloring sheet and a small section of the floor. Emma startled, a soft cry escaping. John moved instinctively, but Sarah's hand rested lightly on his arm. "Let her explore," she whispered, a calm directive that carried authority. John paused, letting the girls navigate the incident with gentle guidance. Sarah moved efficiently, wiping the spill, reassuring Lily, redirecting attention, balancing control with encouragement. Daniel and Lauren both scribbled furiously, noting every subtle shift, every reaction. John exhaled, realizing that what could have been chaos had become a lesson in trust, boundary setting, and composure. The children resumed their play, cautious, aware, yet engaged. John felt a spark of pride tempered by the knowledge that the observers were cataloguing every nuance. Minutes passed. John glanced at Emma, now relaxed fingers loosely gripping his shirt. Lily leaned toward Emma, narrating again, offering crayons, shaping a sense of connection between them. Sarah's voice remained soft, steady, a quiet counterpoint to the scrutiny. John sensed the rhythm of attention, care, and subtle guidance, a choreography that required constant awareness and emotional precision. The cafe door chimed again, and John's pulse quickened. A teenager entered carrying a small backpack, eyes wide, surveying the room with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. She glanced at the children, then at Sarah and John, as if measuring boundaries. Sarah's eyes flicked to the door, and back to John, a silent question in her glance. John nodded subtly. "It's fine," he murmured. The girl hesitated, then moved to a table nearby, unpacking a sketch pad and quietly observing. The rhythm of observation intensified. Daniel leaned forward, pen-hovering eyes, scanning micro-expressions, posture, tone of voice, hand placement. Lauren adjusted her notepad, noting the interplay between autonomy and guidance. John felt the weight of every action, the significance of subtle gestures magnified under scrutiny. Then, without warning, a sharp laugh broke the quiet. A man had entered late 40s, carrying a laptop bag exuding authority and impatience. He moved directly toward Sarah, voice low but firm. "Is everything proceeding according to protocol?" he asked. Sarah straightened a brief flash of irritation, then nodded. "Yes. But the children are adjusting to observation. We are maintaining guidance without interference." John felt his chest tighten. More scrutiny, more pressure. Yet the children remained calm, their play uninterrupted. Emma cooed softly. Lily leaned forward, crayons in hand, narrating their small universe. The man's eyes flicked to the girls, then to John, then back to Sarah. A subtle shift passed between him and the observer's recognition of competence, awareness of authority, exercised with care. The cafe's rhythm continued layering observation with play, guidance with independence. John adjusted Emma in his lap, noting the subtle micro-expressions, the faint adjustments Sarah made in her movements, the careful spacing between the children, the guidance offered with minimal intervention. He realized that patience, attentiveness, and subtle authority could influence outcomes more than direct instruction. Then came the twist, a soft cry from Emma, a small stumble from Lily, and both children reached simultaneously toward a small bowl of spilled markers. John moved, Sarah moved observers, scribbled all simultaneously aware that a single misstep could trigger a cascade. But Sarah's calm, measured intervention, a hand on each child. Gentle guidance. Soft voice resolved the incident. Emma calmed. Lily adjusted the room, held its balance, observers marking competence, resilience, and situational awareness. John exhaled slowly, heart pounding with relief and recognition. The morning had evolved from simple observation to a complex interplay of authority, trust, guidance, and resilience. Each participant, children, adults, observers, had played a part shaping outcomes with precision and care. The room alive with subtle tension had become a crucible for learning, trust, and connection. By mid-afternoon, the cafe settled into a steady rhythm. Emma rested against John, fingers lightly gripping his shirt. Lily continued her narration, crayons moving with deliberation. Sarah moved efficiently behind the counter, occasionally glancing at John, a small smile of acknowledgement passing between them. Daniel and Lauren sat quietly, pens scratching, eyes attentive, observing patterns of trust, authority, and empathy. John realized fully that every decision, every micro-expression, every gentle correction had carried significance far beyond the moment. The morning had tested endurance, patience, and emotional presence, but it had also revealed the power of calm, deliberate guidance, trust, and empathy in shaping not just the children's experience, but the perception of every observer present. He glanced at Sarah, their eyes meeting in a quiet acknowledgement. The day had been intense, layered, scrutinized, and exacting, and yet the small victories the children's play, Emma's calm, Lily's engagement, the subtle shifts of trust and guidance had created a tapestry of success, human connection, and understanding that would resonate far beyond the cafe walls. Outside Maple Street shimmered under the afternoon sun. Inside, the lessons of patience, observation, and deliberate empathy had been learned, tested, and quietly affirmed. John held Emma a little closer, breathing in the moment, knowing that the challenges ahead would demand even more focus, calm, and courage, but confident that the foundation laid this morning could carry them through whatever came next. The late afternoon sun filtered through the cafe windows, casting long golden streaks across the worn wooden floor. Shadows of trees outside danced lazily across the walls, but inside the air was charged taut with anticipation. John Miller adjusted Emma in her carrier, her small body pressing against his chest, tiny fingers tracing the seam of his shirt. Her eyes were bright, tracking every movement, a mixture of curiosity and recognition. Lily leaned over the corner table pencil, hovering mid-air, lips pursed in concentration. Sarah moved with precise efficiency behind the counter, balancing orders, keeping an eye on both girls, and intermittently scanning the cafe. There was a subtle tension in her posture, a weight of responsibility that seemed to bend the space around her. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, yet carried warmth, a soft humanity beneath the steel of her control. She glanced at John, briefly offering the smallest nod of reassurance. The bell above the door chimed sharp and deliberate, slicing through the low hum of conversation. John tensed automatically, Emma stirring against him. A woman stepped inside, mid-40s, tall, dark coat draped over her arm, a briefcase swinging slightly with her stride. Her gaze swept the room with sharp scrutiny, registering every detail, the arrangement of the tables, the subtle spacing between the children, the alignment of Sarah's movements, the careful monitoring of John. "Sarah Thompson?" the woman asked, voice even controlled. "I'm Dr. Evelyn Carter. I'll be observing today's interactions for developmental and behavioral assessment purposes. I'll be taking notes, and my evaluation will include both environmental factors and adult-child dynamics." Her eyes settled briefly on John, lingering on Emma's alert expression, then flicked to Lily, assessing her posture and focus. John's stomach tightened. Another observer. Another layer of scrutiny. He adjusted Emma, keeping her close, a protective instinct sparking in his chest. Sarah's posture stiffened, yet she remained composed, eyes meeting Dr. Carter's with a controlled acknowledgement. "Understood," she said quietly, her voice steady, almost measured. "You're welcome to observe, but the children's play and engagement take priority." Minutes passed in a charged rhythm. Every movement, every glance, every small gesture carried weight. John exhaled slowly, focusing on the girls, trying to maintain the calm that had become second nature on the plane and in the morning's cafe observation. Lily handed Emma a crayon carefully. Emma reached for it, small fingers brushing the older girl's hand. A subtle connection, delicate and immediate, formed across the table. Then unexpectedly, a sharp sound. Emma knocked a small cup off the edge of the table, spilling water across the surface. John tensed, ready to react, but Sarah was already moving. Her hands were steady, guiding the girls, wiping the spill, restoring calm. Dr. Carter leaned slightly forward, pen-poised eyes, scanning every micro-reaction, John's breath, his subtle adjustments, the girls' responses. Sarah's intervention. John felt the pressure keenly. Each observer recorded, analyzed, assessed. Every instinctive decision was catalogued, weighed, evaluated. He exhaled, allowing the girls to recalibrate, return to play. Emma cooed softly. Lily resumed her narration of colors and shapes. The room's rhythm stabilized tension, converting into delicate, careful equilibrium. The cafe door chimed again. A man entered mid-50s glasses, perched low on his nose, hands clasped behind his back, moving with the precision of someone accustomed to control. He surveyed the room with a quiet authority, eyes sweeping from Sarah to John to the children. John felt the subtle shift immediately. Tension coiled around him, tight and deliberate. "John Miller." The man asked, voice deep and measured. "I'm Thomas Reynolds, Executive Evaluator for Community Childcare Integration. I'm here to assess adult coordination, risk management, and child engagement strategies." His eyes lingered on Emma and Lily, then scanned the rest of the cafe, noting subtle environmental variables. John adjusted Emma, a protective instinct sparking in response to the precise weight of Thomas's gaze. Sarah's shoulders squared, eyes meeting the evaluators. "Everything is proceeding according to plan," she said, her voice controlled, careful. "The children's engagement and safety remain the focus." Thomas nodded once, slight, deliberate. John exhaled slowly, realizing that the afternoon had evolved into a complex, layered orchestration, observation guidance, subtle authority and trust. Then came the subtle challenge. Lily leaned too far, a crayon slipping from her grasp. Emma reached instinctively, and their hands collided over the scattered tools. John tensed, muscles ready to intervene, but Sarah's voice cut through, calm, yet firm. "Steady," she whispered. "Work through it carefully." Both girls adjusted small breaths, held and released, eyes meeting, negotiating boundaries instinctively. Dr. Carter scribbled furiously, pen scratching across her pad, cataloguing every glance, every subtle cue, every adjustment. Thomas's gaze followed, noting micro-decisions, emotional regulation and adaptability. John felt a rush of understanding. This was a test of patience. Presence, authority, and empathy all intertwined. Minutes stretched into a quiet rhythm, the girls playing cooperatively, the adults observing silently, the environment thick with the tension of scrutiny and the subtle satisfaction of mastery under pressure. John adjusted Emma in his lap, chest pressing gently against hers, feeling the rhythm of her breathing, the weight of her small body, grounding him in the present. Suddenly the cafe door swung open again, the bell chiming sharply. John tensed. A young woman entered mid-20s, carrying a digital tablet and notebook, her steps purposeful. She scanned the room, noting positions, spacing, engagement, interaction quality. Sarah's posture shifted subtly, eyes flicking toward the newcomer, acknowledging her without a word. "Sarah Thompson," the young woman said softly, voice carrying across the cafe without disruption. "I'm Abigail Moore, Educational Compliance Officer. I'll be reviewing protocols, child engagement, and adult responsiveness. Observations will include both direct and indirect interactions." Her gaze settled briefly on John and Emma, then moved to Lily, assessing micro-behaviors and environmental interactions. John's chest tightened again, a low pulse of anxiety threading through him. Multiple layers of observation, all converging simultaneously. Sarah's subtle nod reassured him. He exhaled slowly, centering himself, letting Emma settle against him. Lily's focus returned to crayons, tiny hands moving deliberately, narrating each color. The pattern continued, complex and exacting. Each interaction, each adjustment, every nuanced gesture carried weight. John and Sarah moved in tandem, a choreography of guidance, protection, and empowerment, responding to both children and observers seamlessly. Emma's coos punctuated the quiet, a delicate reminder of innocence amidst scrutiny. Then a minor incident, a cup tipped over near the counter, splashing coffee onto the floor. The noise startled everyone. John instinctively shifted Emma, tightening slightly. Sarah moved immediately, steadying the girls, wiping the mess, providing calm reassurance. Dr. Carter and Thomas exchanged subtle glances, pens scratching notes, the weight of observation pressing on every micro-interaction. The children resumed play, hands brushing crayons, shapes forming across paper, laughter small and careful. John felt the tension ease fractionally. The observer's silent acknowledgement of competence passed unnoticed by the children, yet profoundly affected him. Every decision, every subtle adjustment had been catalogued, every reaction measured. Outside sunlight slanted across Maple Street, reflecting the slow movement of late afternoon. Inside the cafe remained alive with gentle chaos and careful management. John understood fully that every micro-action had consequences. Every interaction carried weight, and every choice reflected authority, empathy, and presence. The afternoon had been a crucible of patience, attention, and emotional regulation. John held Emma closer, watching Lily narrate to her, realizing the fragile beauty of connection under pressure. The observers continued to write note and analyze, but the children were learning, trusting, and engaging in the moment. John exhaled, chest tightening with a mixture of exhaustion and quiet triumph. The tests of observation, authority, and trust had been met, and yet he knew the day was far from over. Each layer of scrutiny, each small challenge had taught him more about presence, responsibility, and the subtle power of calm guidance than any previous experience. The light outside softened as afternoon drifted toward evening. Inside the cafe hummed with activity, observation, and the delicate, measured rhythm of children, adults, and the interplay of trust and authority. John adjusted Emma again, whispering softly into her ear, "We're learning, baby. Together." And for the first time that day, he felt the quiet surge of understanding. The morning, the afternoon, and the scrutiny of observers had forged something stronger. Resilience, empathy, and an unspoken, unbreakable connection between father-children and the small network of guidance surrounding them. The late afternoon light had begun to tilt across Maple Street, casting long, warm shadows through the cafe's windows. John Miller sat at the corner table, Emma nestled against his chest, eyelids heavy, but eyes still alert. Lily was busy at the corner table, carefully filling in a drawing with crayons, narrating to herself as if the paper could understand her words. The cafe, once quiet, had settled into a soft rhythm. The hiss of espresso machines, the clink of cups, muted conversation threading through the room. But the tension from earlier still hummed in the air, invisible yet tangible, threading through every movement, every glance. Sarah moved behind the counter, with precise efficiency, serving coffee, stacking plates, and keeping an attentive eye on both children. Her movements were deliberate, a blend of practiced habit and acute awareness, each gesture communicating calm authority. She glanced at John occasionally. Small nods passing silently between them, a tacit acknowledgement that the day was far from over. The door chimed sharply, and John's chest tightened instinctively. A woman stepped inside, mid-30s, carrying a small notebook and tablet. Her posture was rigid, her gaze sharp, evaluating every detail in the room. The placement of tables, the spacing between the children, the subtleties of adult attention. She paused near the entrance, then stepped forward with measured, confident steps. "Sarah Thompson," she said, voice low but firm. "I'm Claire Hollingsworth, Early Childhood Standards Assessor. I've been asked to observe interactions and assess developmental protocols for the day." Her eyes flicked briefly to John and Emma, then to Lily, scanning micro-expressions, body language, and engagement. John's hand tightened slightly on Emma's carrier. Another layer of scrutiny. Another evaluation. Sarah straightened shoulders, squared eyes locking briefly with Claire's. "Understood," she replied, calm, but carrying the subtle tension of responsibility. "Please observe but maintain minimal interference with the children's activities." Claire nodded once, settling at a table near the back, pen poised, eyes sharp. For a few minutes the cafe moved in a careful rhythm. John adjusted Emma, who cooed softly, tiny fingers brushing the edge of his shirt. Lily continued her narration, crayons tracing vibrant lines across paper, narrating colors and shapes with meticulous focus. The children's play seemed ordinary, yet under the watchful eyes, every action, every glance, every small gesture carried weight, layered with observation and subtle evaluation. Then a sharp sound, the low clatter of a chair, tipping over near the counter, made both girls startle. Emma let out a small cry. Lily froze mid-stroke, lips pursed. John's body tensed, ready to react, but Sarah moved before him. Her hands were steady, guiding Lily back into place, soothing the startled Emma, and gently redirecting their attention. Claire's pen scratched across the pad, noting each micro-reaction, each instinctive decision, each moment of authority paired with empathy. The cafe door opened again, and a man entered mid-40s, wearing a tailored grey blazer, his expression composed but sharply evaluative. His gaze swept the room, calculating, observing subtle patterns of interaction, micro-gestures, and environmental cues. John instinctively tightened his hold on Emma, feeling the weight of this new scrutiny. Sarah's posture remained calm but taut, a subtle acknowledgement passing between her and the newcomer. "John Miller," the man said. Voice even controlled each syllable, deliberate. "I'm Michael Pierce, behavioral consultant for early childhood environments. I've been assigned to monitor adult-child interaction quality, adherence to safety protocols, and developmental engagement strategies. I will be documenting observations." His eyes flicked to the children, noting posture expression and micro-reactions, then scanned the adults with measured attention. Sarah moved toward him with subtle authority, guiding him to a small table in the corner. "Please observe quietly," she said, tone-controlled, calm. "We maintain oversight without disrupting the children's engagement." John exhaled slowly, feeling the pressure settle over him. The room, once a simple cafe, had transformed into a microcosm of scrutiny, evaluation, and delicate authority. The afternoon stretched on in measured rhythm. Emma cooed softly against John's chest. Lily narrated her coloring with intense focus, and the adults observed pens, scratching eyes assessing subtle nods of acknowledgement, exchanged. John found himself tracking every movement, every micro-expression, every gesture. Each interaction had consequences, and every decision required measured precision. Then came the unanticipated disruption. A minor spill at the corner table, a small bowl of water tipped over, rolling across the floor toward Emma's carrier. Both children reacted instinctively. Lily recoiling slightly, Emma startling small cry escaping. John tensed, muscles coiled, ready to intervene, but Sarah moved first. Her hands steadied both children, her voice calm but firm. "It's okay," she said softly, guiding them with practiced authority. "Accidents happen. Let's adjust." The spill was contained, the children reassured and order restored. Michael Pierce and Claire Hollingsworth both scribbled notes, furiously documenting the incident, cataloguing each reaction, each micro-movement, the application of authority, the gentle management of surprise and fear. John exhaled, realizing that what could have unraveled chaos had instead become a demonstration of trust, authority, and composure under pressure. Minutes later, a subtle energy shifted. Lily reached across the table toward Emma, tiny fingers brushing. Emma responded instinctively, tentative, curious. Sarah's soft voice guided the interaction, encouraging connection without force. John watched, his chest tightening with pride and relief. Even under observation, even amid subtle tension, the children were learning to trust, to interact, to adapt. The cafe door chimed again, and a woman entered. Early 60s hair, silvered with age, eyes sharp and experienced, her presence immediately commanding attention. She moved with quiet authority, scanning the room with practiced precision, noting environmental setup, adult positioning, and child engagement. John's pulse quickened slightly, Emma stirring against his chest, sensing the shift. "Sarah Thompson," the woman said, calm and deliberate. "I'm Dr. Helen Carver, Program Supervisor. I will be evaluating environmental control, adult guidance, and developmental engagement standards today." Her gaze swept the room, noting every interaction, every movement, and every subtle shift in energy. John felt the weight of her attention, like a physical presence. Sarah's posture remained steady, yet a flicker of tension crossed her eyes. "Understood," she replied softly. "Please observe, but maintain minimal interference. Children's play and learning remain the focus." Helen nodded. Pen-poised eyes, tracking every motion, subtle adjustment, and interaction. The children resumed their activity. Crayons scratching against paper. Emma cooing softly. Lily narrating colors and shapes. The room's rhythm, delicate and layered, carried an unspoken tension, a ballet of observation, subtle authority, and trust. John adjusted Emma in his lap, chest, pressing gently against hers, her tiny fingers gripping his shirt. He exhaled slowly, grounding himself. Then a subtle test emerged. Lily knocked over a small container of colored pencils. Emma reached instinctively. John reacted with a quick movement, but Sarah's hand steadied his arm, guiding both girls calmly. Her words, soft and precise, restored balance. "It's okay. Adjust carefully." The children followed order, re-established. The observers scribbled notes tracking authority, composure, and emotional regulation. Minutes stretched in a rhythm of play, oversight, and careful interaction. The children's engagement persisted. Subtle guidance met with curiosity, trust forming in small gestures. John realized that every decision, every gesture, every glance had weight beyond the moment. Authority, empathy, patience, and subtle influence were being measured and reinforced simultaneously. The light outside softened afternoon, tipping toward evening. The cafe hummed gently with life-muted conversation, the hiss of machines, the soft clink of cups, the gentle scrape of crayons across paper. John adjusted Emma, whispering softly into her ear, "We're learning, baby, together." And in that quiet, charged moment, he understood fully that the day had become more than a test. It was a crucible of trust, guidance, and connection, shaping not only the children, but the adults around them, leaving ripples that would extend far beyond the walls of the cafe. Evening settled over Maple Street, long shadows stretching across the sidewalk as the sun dipped low, spilling amber light into the cafe. The small bell above the door chimed, and John Miller shifted Emma slightly in his arms. Her eyes were wide, tracking the movement at the entrance, fingers curling around the carrier's edge with a mixture of curiosity and fatigue. Lily glanced up from her coloring brow, furrowed in concentration, then relaxed when she saw John. Sarah moved behind the counter, her hands wiping tables with methodical precision, eyes darting occasionally to the children. There was a tension in her posture, a quiet awareness that tonight's observations carried more weight than the morning had suggested. Every gesture, every glance, every soft word held significance. She had learned long ago that control, empathy, and attention were inseparable in this delicate dance of caregiving. The door opened again, chiming softly, and a man entered. Mid-40s, dark grey suit, carefully polished shoes, eyes sharp and calculating. He paused at the threshold, taking in the room with an intensity that made John's stomach tighten. This was not casual observation. Every detail, from the spacing of tables to the way the children interacted, seemed under his scrutiny. John felt Emma stir against his chest, her tiny fingers pressing against his shirt instinctively. "Sarah Thompson," the man said, voice calm but commanding. "I'm David Klein, independent consultant for developmental oversight. I'll be observing interactions today. Notes will be taken on behavior at adult intervention and environmental safety." His eyes scanned the room, resting briefly on Emma and Lily, before returning to John and Sarah. Sarah straightened, nodding with quiet authority. "Understood," she said. "Observation is welcome, but the children's play and engagement remain the priority." John exhaled slowly, adjusting Emma, feeling the weight of scrutiny settle around them like a physical presence. The room held a tense rhythm, each micro-movement observed, each glance, recorded, each adjustment catalogued. Emma cooed softly, her tiny eyes bright with alertness. Lily narrated her drawing with measured concentration, her small hands moving deliberately, occasionally glancing toward her father. The cafe's ambient noises, the hiss of espresso muted conversation, faint clatter of dishes, intertwined with the charged focus of observation, creating a quiet symphony of tension. Then, unexpectedly, the bell chimed again. A woman entered, mid-50s, hair streaked with silver, carrying a leather notebook. Her steps were deliberate, her posture commanding without needing to assert it vocally. She scanned the room carefully, noting every environmental factor, every adult-child interaction, every subtle shift in energy. John felt a flicker of apprehension, Emma stiffening slightly against his chest. "Sarah Thompson," she said, her voice firm, resonant. "I'm Dr. Margaret Cole, Program Evaluator for Early Childhood Oversight. I will be reviewing adult-child engagement and environmental safety protocols. I'll be taking detailed notes." Her gaze lingered on John and Emma, then on Lily, assessing posture, micro-reactions, and responsiveness. Sarah's posture remained controlled, shoulders squared, eyes, meeting Dr. Cole's with calm acknowledgement. "Understood," she said softly, each word, precise, conveying authority and composure. "Observation is permitted, but the focus must remain on the children." John exhaled, feeling the room's energy tighten further, anticipation coiling in the pit of his stomach. The next 30 minutes unfolded in careful rhythm. Emma cooed softly, fingers brushing John's shirt. Small movements guided by instinct and curiosity. Lily continued her narration, crayons tracing vibrant lines across paper, her voice soft but deliberate. Every interaction, from a glance to a small gesture, carried weight under the watchful eyes of observers. John's awareness, heightened, noting subtle cues, micro-expressions, and the intricate dance of guidance, trust, and authority. Suddenly the balance shifted. Lily accidentally knocked over a cup of colored pencils, sending a small cascade of pencils rolling toward Emma's carrier. The baby startled, a high-pitched cry escaping. John instinctively leaned forward, muscles coiled, but Sarah's hand rested lightly on his arm. "Let them adjust," she whispered, calm but commanding. She moved swiftly, steadying both children, redirecting their attention, guiding them through the minor accident with soft words and precise gestures. The observers scribbled notes furiously, capturing each response, each micro-movement, each demonstration of authority, tempered with care. John exhaled slowly, chest tightening with relief as the incident passed without escalation. Emma's crying subsided. Lily returned to her narration, and the room regained its fragile equilibrium. Time stretched, measured in subtle movements and soft coos. The children played, interacting cautiously, learning boundaries, negotiating space with minimal interference. John realized the significance of every choice he made, the way he adjusted Emma. The tone of his voice, the placement of his hands, even the smallest glance. Each micro-action shaped the children's experience and influenced the observer's assessment. Then came another shift. A teenager entered carrying a sketchbook and tablet, scanning the room with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Her presence was subtle but influential, affecting the rhythm of attention in the room. Sarah's eyes flicked toward her briefly, then back to the children, signaling subtle awareness without disruption. Lily glanced up, sensing a new observer, while Emma's gaze followed instinctively. The atmosphere grew denser, tension threading through every action. David Klein and Dr. Cole scribbled notes capturing micro-expressions, gestural nuances, and responses to environmental variables. John felt the pressure, aware that each decision, each small movement, carried amplified consequence. He adjusted. Emma whispered softly into her ear, and felt a flicker of calm pass through her. Then an unexpected event. A small vase on the counter wobbled, tipped slightly, and a few drops of water splashed onto the floor. Emma cried softly, startled. John moved instinctively, muscles coiled, ready to intervene. Sarah's hand rested on his shoulder, steadying him. "Let it pass," she whispered. She moved with precision, guiding the children, ensuring the environment remained safe. Authority, maintained, empathy, sustained. The incident passed observers recording, diligently noting composure and subtle crisis management. Minutes ticked by, the children learning, adjusting, responding to guidance with curiosity and trust. The adults maintained careful rhythm, balancing authority, observation, and responsiveness. The cafe's ambient sounds, espresso hiss, quiet chatter. The soft scraping of crayons interwove with the charged undercurrent of scrutiny. John noticed subtle shifts in the observer's posture and expressions, faint acknowledgement of competence and attentiveness. Outside sunlight softened, drifting toward early evening. Inside the cafe held a tense, deliberate harmony, children exploring, adults guiding, observers noting. Each gesture mattered. Each glance carried meaning. Each small correction communicated trust, safety, and presence. John understood fully that every action, every micro-expression, every soft word had consequences far beyond the immediate moment. Then the bell chimed again. A woman entered, older, early 60s hair, silvered but meticulously styled eyes, sharp with professional scrutiny. She scanned the room quickly, noting placement, spacing, and interaction quality. John's muscles tightened slightly, Emma shifting against his chest. Sarah's posture tightened too, eyes locking briefly with the newcomer. "Sarah Thompson," the woman said, calm and authoritative. "I'm Dr. Elaine Harmon, Program Director. I'm here to assess adult-child interaction and environmental standards for developmental engagement." Her eyes swept the room, resting briefly on the children before scanning John and Sarah. Every subtle gesture, every movement, every micro-expression would be part of her evaluation. Sarah acknowledged her with a controlled nod. Understood. Observation is permitted, but focus remains on the children. John exhaled slowly, tightening his hold on Emma. The room's energy shifted subtly, awareness, heightening tension threading through every movement. The afternoon continued in this careful rhythm. Play observation, guidance assessment. Each micro-action carried weight, each small adjustment influenced perception. John noticed how Sarah's subtle cues guided Lily and Emma, how the children adapted to oversight while maintaining curiosity and engagement. Then a sudden, subtle crisis. Emma reached for a fallen crayon, brushing against Lily's hand. A minor conflict, instant reaction. John moved, but Sarah intervened first, guiding both children calmly, softly redirecting their attention. Observers scribbled rapidly, capturing micro-reactions, authority applied with empathy, composure maintained. The tension, once sharp, began to settle into a fragile equilibrium. The children continued their activity, crayons scratching across paper fingers, brushing, narrating colors and shapes. John felt a quiet surge of pride tempered with awareness. Every choice he made, every gesture, every glance had shaped the room, influenced the children, and contributed to the observer's assessment. As sunlight waned, the cafe glowed in a soft amber hue. John held Emma close, whispering softly, "We're learning, baby. Together." He felt the weight of the day, the scrutiny, the pressure, the careful choreography of interaction transform into quiet triumph. Trust established authority, balanced with empathy, resilience demonstrated under observation. The day had unfolded like a slow crescendo. Each event layered each challenge, shaping understanding every interaction, a test of patience, presence, and emotional intelligence. John exhaled deeply. eyes on the children, aware that every micro-movement, every soft word, every intentional gesture would resonate far beyond the walls of the small cafe, influencing learning, connection, and human trust in ways subtle yet profound. The light outside had softened to a deep golden hue, spilling across the cafe windows and illuminating floating dust particles like tiny suspended stars. John Miller adjusted Emma in her carrier. The baby now calm, her breathing slow and even, tiny fingers curling lightly around the edge of his shirt. Lily sat nearby, still absorbed in her drawing, but occasionally glancing toward John and Emma with a mixture of curiosity and protective vigilance. The cafe had settled into a rhythm, quiet, yet layered with subtle tension, each movement weighted by the day's earlier scrutiny. Sarah Thompson moved behind the counter with deliberate precision, wiping tables, stacking plates, and maintaining an attentive watch on the children. There was a rhythm to her motion, a subtle authority underlying every gesture, as if she could sense the invisible threads connecting attention, trust, and safety. Her eyes flicked to John briefly, a small, knowing nod passing silently between them, a shared acknowledgement that the morning's observations had been only the beginning. The bell over the door chimed sharp and deliberate. John tensed, Emma stirring slightly, her tiny eyes alert. A man stepped inside, mid-40s, dressed in a dark suit with understated elegance. His posture was rigid, controlled, and his eyes swept the room with precision, measuring space movement and interaction. John's pulse tightened instinctively. The air shifted, the subtle tension in the cafe thickening, nearly tangible. "Sarah Thompson?" the man asked, voice low, steady, commanding attention without raising it. "I'm Gregory Hale, independent observer for Child Development Compliance. My assignment is to assess adult-child interaction, environmental safety, and behavioral responsiveness. I will be taking detailed notes." His eyes lingered on Emma and Lily, then returned to John and Sarah, evaluating micro-expressions, posture, and reactions. Sarah straightened shoulders, squared eyes meeting his with controlled assurance. "Observation is welcome," she said, her voice soft but resolute. The children's play and engagement remained the priority. John exhaled slowly, adjusting Emma. He felt the weight of scrutiny settle over him again, a reminder that even ordinary moments now carried amplified consequence. The cafe moved in a tense rhythm, subtle and deliberate. Emma cooed softly, fingers brushing John's chest. Lily narrating her artwork with meticulous focus. Each interaction, glance, and gesture seemed magnified under the watchful eyes of observers, layered with an almost cinematic attention to micro-movements, tone, and body language. John felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the need to be precise, calm, and deliberate. Then, unexpectedly, a minor disturbance. Lily knocked over a small container of pencils. Emma reacted instinctively, a soft cry escaping. John shifted forward, ready to intervene, but Sarah's hand rested lightly on his arm, guiding him to restraint. "Let them adjust," she whispered, her tone calm, commanding. She moved fluidly, steadying both children, redirecting attention without imposing authority, allowing autonomy to persist. The observers scribbled, documenting every nuance, John's subtle guidance, Sarah's interventions, the children's micro-reactions, the recalibration of trust and engagement. John exhaled, the tension threading through his chest, easing fractionally as the minor incident resolved smoothly. Emma's coos returned, Lily's narration resumed, and the room regained a delicate equilibrium. Minutes passed, stretching into quiet observation. The children's play continued, each gesture, each exchange of crayons, each tiny shift in posture, a lesson in collaboration and social negotiation. John realized fully that every action how he adjusted Emma. The tone of his voice, the positioning of his hands, was shaping not only the children's experience, but also the perceptions of the observers. Every choice had weight subtle, yet profound. The door chimed again. John's muscles tensed instinctively. A woman entered, mid-50s hair, streaked with silver eyes, sharp and assessing. She carried a clipboard and tablet, moving with deliberate steps, scanning the room with precision. Sarah's posture shifted subtly, a flicker of awareness passing between her and John. The children paused, sensing a new energy in the space. "Sarah Thompson." The woman said, her voice steady, commanding yet calm. "I'm Dr. Vivian Lang, Senior Program Evaluator. I will be reviewing adult-child interactions, environmental arrangements, and engagement protocols. Observations will be detailed, and notes will include micro-behaviors and responsiveness." Her gaze swept the room, resting briefly on John and Emma, then scanning Lily, cataloguing posture engagement and subtle cues. Sarah acknowledged her with a controlled nod. "Understood. Observation is permitted, but the focus remains on the children," she said. John exhaled slowly, tightening his hold on Emma, sensing the subtle weight of oversight layering atop the morning and afternoon assessments. The energy in the room shifted once more, charged yet deliberate, each adult aware of the stakes, each child responding to the unspoken rules of engagement. Time stretched in meticulous rhythm. Emma cooed softly, small fingers brushing John's shirt, a grounding touch. Lily narrated her coloring in careful, deliberate tones, occasionally glancing at John and Emma. Every gesture carried significance, measured against an invisible scale, evaluated for authority, empathy, and attention. John noticed the subtle shifts in the observer's posture, the micro-expressions of acknowledgement, the faint signs of approval passing silently among them. Suddenly, a subtle crisis emerged. A cup of juice tipped slightly, spilling liquid across the edge of the table. Emma reacted immediately, startled soft cry escaping. John moved instinctively, but Sarah's hand steadied him, guiding both children with precise, gentle movements. "Adjust carefully," she whispered. The girls recalibrated quickly. The minor incident resolved without escalation. Observers scribbled notes furiously, recording the application of authority, empathy, and crisis management in real time. Minutes passed in quiet tension and delicate equilibrium. The children's engagement persisted, micro-adjustments, soft guidance, and trust forming a fragile but undeniable web. John realized that patience presence and measured intervention could influence outcomes more profoundly than direct instruction or overcorrection. Emma's coos. Lily's narrations, Sarah's calm authority, and the observer's quiet vigilance wove together a complex tapestry of learning, trust, and assessment. Then came the unexpected. Emma reached across the table toward Lily's drawing, tiny fingers brushing curiosity, overriding caution. Lily paused, then smiled faintly, adjusting her hand. Sarah's voice cut softly through the charged space, guiding without intrusion. "Encourage connection. Observe carefully." John exhaled tension, giving way to focus, marveling at the delicate balance of trust, curiosity, and authority in the room. The sun outside continued its slow descent, painting the cafe in amber light. The children's play became a choreography of gentle negotiation, exploration, and communication. John adjusted Emma, feeling her tiny grip tighten on his shirt. He understood fully that the day's scrutiny, layered observation, and subtle challenges had become a crucible, testing resilience, empathy, and presence, shaping not only the children's experience but his own. Minutes turned into a gentle rhythm, observations, continuing interventions. Subtle, guidance, precise. John noticed how Sarah's hands moved, how her eyes communicated reassurance, how the children responded instinctively to calm authority. Emma cooed, Lily's narrations continued, and the room settled into a delicate balance of play, observation, and guidance. The cafe's ambient sounds, the hiss of espresso muted conversation, the soft scratching of crayons interwove with the invisible tension of assessment. John felt a quiet surge of pride and understanding. Every action, every glance, every gesture mattered. Authority, empathy, patience, and trust were being exercised and measured simultaneously. As the evening light deepened, casting long shadows across the floor, John whispered softly to Emma, "We're learning baby. Together." He felt the weight of the day, the scrutiny, the pressure, the choreography of observation transform into quiet triumph. Trust had been earned, authority, balanced with empathy and resilience, demonstrated under the watchful eyes of those observing. The afternoon's events had built an intricate web of interaction, observation, and learning. John held Emma a little closer, Lily narrating quietly beside them, and understood fully that every choice, every movement, and every subtle gesture had consequences far beyond the immediate moment. The cafe, quiet yet alive, had become a crucible for trust, guidance, and connection, leaving ripples that would resonate long after the sun had set. The cafe was quiet now, the golden afternoon fading into the soft hues of early evening, casting long shadows across the wooden floor and highlighting the dust motes that floated lazily in the warm light. John Miller sat at the corner table, Emma resting peacefully against his chest, her tiny body rising and falling with each slow breath. Lily was at the small table near the window, crayons scattered around her, completely absorbed in finishing her butterfly drawing. There was a gentle hum of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine, the faint clink of cups. But beneath it, the tension of the day lingered, subtle, like a pulse beneath the floorboards. John adjusted Emma, feeling the slight warmth of her body against his chest, her soft fingers brushing the fabric of his shirt. He exhaled slowly, letting the calm settle over him. The morning had been a test. The afternoon had been another. Layers of scrutiny, observation, and subtle evaluation had pressed down on him and Sarah. Yet here they were, still intact, still composed, still connected. He watched Sarah move behind the counter with precise efficiency, stacking cups, cleaning surfaces, and checking on the girls with the same careful awareness that had guided every interaction since the flight. Her movements were fluid, authoritative, but never heavy-handed, her calm energy threading through the room like an invisible tether holding everyone steady. The door chimed softly, and John's pulse quickened. He looked up to see a man entering mid-50s, navy blazer, neatly combed hair, eyes sharp and assessing. His steps were deliberate, measured, almost surgical, and the room seemed to tense subtly at his presence. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm, the faint scent of expensive cologne trailing behind him. John's hands instinctively gripped Emma a little tighter, the baby stirring, slightly sensing the shift in energy. "Sarah Thompson," the man said, his voice low, smooth, controlled. "I'm Dr. Robert Hayes, independent evaluator for early childhood program standards. I'll be observing interactions, environment management, and adult-child coordination for the remainder of the session. Notes will be detailed and comprehensive." His eyes flicked briefly to John, Emma, and Lily, scanning their expressions, posture, micro-movements, and subtle reactions, before returning to the space as a whole. Sarah's posture remained upright, calm, but alert, her eyes meeting Dr. Hayes's with measured acknowledgement. "Understood," she said, softly. "Observation is permitted, but the children's engagement remains the focus." John exhaled slowly, adjusting Emma, feeling the combined weight of scrutiny and expectation. Minutes passed, the cafe settling into a rhythm of play, observation, and subtle guidance. Emma cooed softly, her small hands exploring the edge of the carrier, occasionally brushing against John's shirt. Lily narrated her coloring meticulously, describing each shade with care and attention, occasionally glancing toward John and Emma, as if checking their approval. Every movement, every glance, every gesture carried significance, layered beneath the observer's quiet focus. Then, unexpectedly, a small incident. Lily's cup of colored pencils tipped over, scattering across the floor. Emma reacted instinctively, a soft cry escaping. John shifted muscles, coiled, ready to intervene, but Sarah was already there, her hands steady and precise, guiding both girls through the minor disruption. Her voice was calm but firm. "It's okay. Adjust carefully." The spill was contained. The children were reassured. Observers scribbled notes, capturing composure authority, applied with empathy and subtle crisis management. John exhaled, chest tightening with relief and awareness. He realized how fragile the balance of trust and guidance was, and how critical every small decision had been throughout the day. He watched the children resume their activity. Emma's soft coos mingling with Lily's careful narration, a fragile but undeniable harmony returning to the room. The door chimed again, and a woman entered, mid-60s, silver hair, tied neatly, eyes sharp and observant. She scanned the room quickly, taking in the arrangement, adult positioning, and the children's engagement. John's chest tightened slightly, Emma stirring against him, sensing the subtle shift. Sarah's posture adjusted ever so slightly, eyes flicking toward the newcomer, then back to the girls. "Sarah Thompson," the woman said, voice calm but carrying authority. "I'm Dr. Margaret Lane, Program Director. I'll be observing adult-child engagement, environmental management, and developmental interactions. Notes will include subtle cues, emotional regulation, and response to minor disruptions." Her eyes lingered on John and Emma before moving to Lily, cataloging posture responsiveness and behavioral engagement. Sarah acknowledged her with a controlled nod. "Observation is permitted. Focus remains on the children," she said softly. John exhaled slowly, realizing that this final layer of scrutiny was an opportunity to demonstrate everything they had practiced and learned throughout the day. Time stretched, deliberate and slow. Emma cooed softly. Lily narrated her coloring crayons, moving with care, hands brushing occasionally. John observed, adjusting Emma's position, offering small words of encouragement, maintaining calm authority, yet allowing the children autonomy and space. Every micro-expression, every gesture, every glance had weight under observation, and John felt the subtle satisfaction of mastery emerging through attentive guidance. Then unexpectedly, a minor challenge arose. Emma reached toward Lily's cup of water, brushing her hand against Lily's small fingers. The movement caused Lily to startle slightly. John tensed, ready to intervene, but Sarah's hand steadied his arm, guiding both children calmly. Her voice, soft but deliberate, redirected attention, maintained trust, and restored equilibrium. Observers scribbled recording authority, exercised with empathy, the maintenance of composure, and the subtle management of interactional tension. Minutes passed, the children's play stabilizing further trust, reinforced autonomy, maintained. John realized the weight of every decision, how he adjusted Emma. The tone of his voice, his posture, and the placement of his hands all contributed to shaping engagement and perception. Sarah's subtle guidance orchestrated the environment, seamlessly supporting both the children's development and the adults' demonstration of competence. The afternoon waned into evening light, softening shadows, stretching across the floor. The cafe had settled into a gentle hum, the children's laughter soft and tentative, the subtle rhythm of observation and interaction carrying them through. John held Emma close, whispering, "We're learning, baby." Together the words low but full of resolve. He felt the weight of the day's scrutiny, the cumulative tension transform into a quiet triumph. Trust established composure, maintained authority, exercised with empathy, resilience demonstrated under continuous observation. The observers began to gather their notes, their presence receding subtly, but leaving a lingering impression of rigorous assessment. John watched Sarah, who moved behind the counter, with quiet confidence, scanning the room one last time, ensuring that the children remained engaged, calm, and secure. Emma stirred slightly. Lily glanced toward her father with a satisfied expression, and the room held a fragile, harmonious energy. John exhaled slowly, shoulders relaxing, chest lightening as he allowed himself to absorb the quiet success of the day. Every decision, every micro-gesture, every subtle intervention had been a lesson, a demonstration, a small victory in presence, empathy, and authority. The children had learned, trusted, and engaged. The adults had navigated scrutiny, stress, and observation with precision and care. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on, reflecting off the cafe windows. Inside, the rhythm of the day concluded in quiet satisfaction. John adjusted Emma once more, her tiny fingers curling around his thumb, and felt the deep, steady pulse of accomplishment. He looked at Sarah, a shared glance passing between them, acknowledgement and relief in equal measure. The day had been a crucible, a test of patience, composure, and deliberate empathy. The lessons would linger long after the cafe emptied, shaping trust, connection, and resilience in ways subtle but enduring. John realized fully that even under scrutiny, even amidst tension, the smallest gestures, the calm voice, the guiding hand, the quiet presence could shape the world for children and adults alike. As the evening light faded into a soft twilight, John whispered to Emma, "We did it, baby." together. He rose slowly, adjusting the carrier, feeling the quiet strength that came from endurance, observation, and connection. Lily packed her crayons carefully, glancing toward her father and Emma, anticipation and satisfaction in her small gaze. Sarah straightened behind the counter, eyes softening a faint smile, curving her lips. The cafe door chimed one last time as they prepared to leave the outside world, beckoning with the promise of evening calm. John held Emma securely, Lily stepping close, Sarah observing with quiet pride. The day's trials, scrutiny, and subtle victories had forged a connection, a rhythm, a trust that would carry forward. And as they stepped out onto Maple Street, the amber glow of streetlights reflecting softly off the pavement, John felt a deep, steady understanding of the power of presence, empathy, and deliberate guidance. The day had ended, but the lessons endured, the bonds formed, and the quiet triumph of human connection remained. If you felt inspired by this story, remember to like, subscribe, and comment joy.